So hopefully you just saw Stephen Colbert talking about how he wants to form a PAC. And so here we come back to what is a PAC? And before we really tackle that question, we're going to want to consider the role of lobbyists. I've already talked about kind of how lobbying was created under Ulysses S. Grant and how that came about. What we need to understand is how much, it's a question in U.S. politics of how much government money, how much money should be in the government. Should Bill Gates be able to spend $1 billion to get his candidate elected? Or should he be able to spend, $500 million to make sure that his policies are what will be passed by Congress? And so this has been a problem throughout this past, the 20th century. And so in 1971, you have the Federal Election Campaign Act, which basically said that any donation over $100 must be reported, so that people had to know what, where money was coming from. So that if you were Bill Clinton, you had to say that you got $200 from Johnny Rocket or whoever it was that was donating money. Now, this set up a few other reforms as well, that money was capped, that people could only individuals could only donate $1,000 towards campaigns, and PACs could only donate $5,000. Then there was the Federal Election Campaign Act of '74, which established the Federal Election Commission. And if you remember, our good friend Trevor Potter, who we just saw interviewing with, just saw him right here, interviewing with Stephen Colbert, he was a former director or former head of the Federal Election Commission. And he made it clear that while we have these rules, in the Federal Election Federal Election Commission, they are not that well enforced. And so they're supposed to enforce these laws, but as he pointed out, no one who has ever had a PAC has been convicted of any crimes. We're fast forwarding to 2002, and this is the McCain-Feingold Act. And we need to understand a few terms before. Basically, what you need to understand is what is soft and hard money. When we talked about these $1,000 and $5,000 donations, this is what is known as hard money. It is money that goes directly to the candidate. So individuals could donate $1,000 to candidate Clinton or Gore or Bush Sr., and PACs could donate $5,000. What changed here was that there was a whole lot of money that people still had burning in their pockets, and what they did was they donated it to the Democratic and Republican parties, and they donated it in what was called soft money. Soft money is money that went to these, soft money is what went to the party for, quote, party building activities. But that definition was really vague, and as a result, parties were able to take unlimited soft money donations and donate for party building, and then they basically justified party building, but with very few restrictions. As a result, when in the 2000 election, George W. Bush ran against John McCain in the primary, and Bush outraised McCain in tons of money, and as a result McCain was pissed, and he created what was known as McCain-Feingold, which increased the limits for individual donations or hard money to $2,500 as the current limit. But it banned soft money contributions essentially altogether. And by banning that, it was restricting money into the political process. This made McCain happy, and essentially it limited a whole bunch of things, including no third-party ads in the last 60 days before an election or 30 days before a primary election. This completely changed the way that elections ran. And so no spending by state parties on federal candidates, but they could raise money for voter registration and get out the vote activities. GOTV is get out the vote. And while they could spend this money, what they could raise, so basically this limited the party's role. And it resulted created what was known as 527s, which was a big deal in like the 2006 election, but subsequently no one really cares about it anymore. And 527s were this obscure part of the tax code that basically allowed you to raise money, and it was a way to get around McCain-Feingold. And individuals were donated money, but corporations did not donate money because they were afraid of violating the law, and they didn't want to get penalized. So no longer is soft money used for federal candidates. Instead, they started going to these 527 organizations that were not allowed to organize with the campaign itself. But they created some devastating ads in 2004, which is one of the reasons why John Kerry lost the election in Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, and I'll bring up that ad later. Alright, all this is mentioned because essentially, as we talked about earlier, there's amicus curiae, friend of the court brief. It's a way that you can influence a Supreme Court decision. Anyone can file one, though generally it's the government and a few wealthy organizations that do so. But this whole issue of money in government is not a new one. Buckley versus Vallejo, which was back in the 70s, basically said that money is speech. Because you can buy advertisements to speak to the people, therefore money overall is speech, and money should not be limited. And that was reinforced in what was called Citizens United versus the FEC, the FEC being the Federal Election Commission. It essentially decided that corporations were allowed to raise, basically created what was known as super PACs, and said that political committees can raise unlimited amounts of money from any source as long as the donations are disclosed and the money is only spent on independent political advertisements. As a result, all of a sudden, corporations were able to donate essentially unlimited amounts of money into the system. And so Stephen Colbert is about to talk about that. Before we get there, I just wanted to quickly explain this because this was frequently misunderstood in class. An issue network is when different interest groups get together and they sort of unify on one issue. So right now they're talking about this pipeline being built from Canada to Texas, and it could be as simple as different environmental interest groups working together. So it could be the Sierra Club, it could be other environmental interest groups working together on the same issue to defeat the pipeline. That would be an issue network created to defeat this pipeline. An iron triangle is essentially shows the reach of the interest groups. And let me just pull that up from the web. As you can see here, you have the interest group is able to influence the federal bureaucracy. Essentially, they are offering money or campaign donations to individual members of Congress, and those members of Congress provide funding for different agencies in the bureaucracy. So if you're trying to influence the Department of Agriculture, well, the Committee on Agriculture in the Congress controls their funding. So the interest group just has to donate money to members of Congress or try to influence those members of Congress to change policy in the bureaucracy. And as a result, thank you, not helpful. And as a result, they end up doing lower regulations for big agricultural corporations or what have you. Anyway, so this is how this direction of the interest group is the more significant part of it, that they are influencing Congress, which then controls the bureaucracy or controls the money of the bureaucracy, power of the purse, and then they do favors for the interest group. So lastly, I'd like you to look at the next video, which is Stephen Colbert explaining his experience with super PACs.